Hot on the heels of Bird declaring bankruptcy and Super Pedestrian announcing an end to its operations, we have more exciting news from the scooter sharing industry. As my last video was being published, the long-rumored disruption in European scooter sharing arrived. It wasn't, as some speculated, Tier merging with Voi. Instead, Tier and Dott have teamed up to create a new giant in European scooter sharing. This marks Tier's third transformation in 2 years as the scooter sharing industry struggles to find its footing. So, what does this mean for the future of scooter sharing? Let's discuss. On this channel, we talk about the rapid evolution of our cities thanks to new mobility trends like scooter sharing, electrification, the affordability crisis, and more. If you're a fan of cities, like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any updates. These days, it feels like you can't go a week without disruptive news in the scooter sharing world. As I mentioned in my last video on the topic, the industry has burned through billions of dollars in investor money in an attempt to create the scooter sharing market. Tier and Dott have been no stranger to this investor money, raising about $500 million between them and taking another $60 million as part of this merger announcement. I don't think that these two are headed for the dustbins of history, despite the missteps that have occurred along the way. Before I explain why I think they have a bright future, let's recap Tier's shaky past. Tier was founded in Berlin in 2018 and quickly raised money from the legendary SoftBank Vision Fund, which you may have heard from successes like WeWork. By March 2022, the company was trying to establish itself as a global leader. To that end, it made a deal with Ford to buy its subsidiary Spin and expand to North America. While the price of that deal was not disclosed, we know that Ford paid about $100 million for Spin back in 2018, and it's fair to say they lost their shirts given that Spin had just laid off about a quarter of its staff when Tier stepped in. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the bad news for Spin. Later that year, they further pulled out of markets, including Canada. Finally, by last fall, Tier had had enough. It dumped Spin for a mere $19 million to then struggling Bird. The deal was for $10 million in cash and about the same amount in stock, which is now worthless since Bird is bankrupt. It's fair to say that that deal wasn't a home run for Tier. Tier made a number of other investments which are harder to analyze. For a long time, their goal has been to consolidate the European market, and to that end they bought companies like Wind and Nextbike. Really, there's been so much change that I could spend this whole video outlining the market entries and exits that each of these companies have made over the years. Instead, let's just say that in the early days of scooter sharing, when the venture capital money was flowing, it seemed like everyone was just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what would stick. The game has new rules now. Profitability and public perception are increasingly important to these companies. In this new version of the game, I think that Tier and Dott have a real shot at making scooter sharing profitable and sustainable over the long term. Here's why. First of all, despite their missteps, I think that these two companies have been more disciplined than their American counterparts. They have tended to move more slowly and view themselves as partners to cities. They have achieved strong win rates on tenders by focusing on realistic business models and keeping their operations in check, even if they did kind of overpromise on software, just like the American players. Second, there's an inherent advantage to focusing on Europe. The cities are more compact, meaning that for the same $5 trip, you can get to far more destinations, which makes more trips possible and increases demand for your service. In addition, European cities boast population densities that North American cities can only dream of, unless they're New York and San Francisco. Density, as they say, is destiny, and that's never more true than in scooter sharing, where you need a steady flow of people taking trips in every single direction to make sure you have a profitable operation. Instead of the North American model, where you take a trip in from the suburbs to your office in the morning, and, if you're more successful than Bird, from your office back to home in the evening, in European cities you have people moving in every direction, really everywhere to everywhere, all throughout the day, meaning lots of opportunities to sell trips to people and a constant flow of foot traffic going past your vehicles. A great example of this is Brussels, where Dott shares the operating license with Bolt. When I visited, it felt like every neighborhood had scooters whipping by at all hours. This works because every neighborhood is compact and has a mix of places where people can live, work, and play, driving a continuous demand for scooter trips. This strong demand from every corner of the city means that scooters are in use for a bigger portion of the day. It's easy to see how that translates into higher profits and better operations. This has benefits for residents too, because the price of a scooter ride goes down when there's more demand for it. This means that if you have $5 to spend on a scooter ride, you can go a lot further in a place like Brussels than you can in a sprawling American suburb. The other big advantage of being in Europe is the regulation. This may sound counterintuitive, but it really does help scooter companies be more profitable. As I mentioned earlier, Dott has an operating license in Brussels. This new regulatory system came after the European capital was flooded by over 8,000 scooters from as many as 9 different operators. Now, with just 2 players, there's a lot less pressure for an arms race to deploy as many scooters as possible in a bid to capture market share. As the 2 remaining companies fine-tune their deployment strategy, we should see a much better matching of supply with demand, meaning better profits and fewer scooters laying around unused. This system, with just 1 or 2 operators allowed to be in each city, is rapidly becoming the norm in Europe, and we're seeing it start up in North America as well. I think that this is good news for the scooter industry and will help it stay viable over the long term. But back to that Tier and Dott merger. What we have now is a combined entity with a presence in every major market in Europe. You can see from this map that Dott has a major presence in Western Europe, while Tier and its subsidiaries are bigger on the eastern side of the continent. As a merged entity, they essentially have complete coverage of the continent. Now they can take this continent-wide entity, the exclusive agreements with cities, and a strong history of operational excellence to deliver a world-class scooter sharing experience. To me, this is a merger that makes a lot of sense, and it will amp up the pressure on rivals like Bolt, Lime, and Voi to deliver a better product and work more closely with cities. If I'm right, we can expect to see several of these companies move to an IPO in the next 18 months. This will reward patient investors who have stuck with the space through thick and thin. So, what do you think? Does this version make sense, or is it just iteration 2 of the spin debacle? Who do you think will be next to announce a merger or consolidation? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe by hitting the bell on the bottom right. Thanks for watching.